Come on home, home to me, and I will hold you in my arms, and joyful be. There will always, always, always be a place for you at my table. Return to me.
Hi, Brother St. Bryce.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to our first interview for the At the Table series. Something that I think we've all been anticipating, and it's good to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, good to be here. Yeah, happy to be here. And of course, good news is good news, and also we're always happy to be part of the service and the function.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think as being somebody that a lot of us know for a long time, it's good for you to kick off this first installment of our series to hear from you.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
Of course. Of course.
We're here to share and to learn from each other. So.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I want you to get comfortable because we're just going to talk for a few minutes. We're going to, just get to know you a bit. I'm going to ask you a few questions, right, about yourself.
I suppose that's what that table is about.
Yes,
so
literally. All right, so to start things off, we know who you are, but maybe not everybody knows who you are, right? So before we even get into who you are exactly, could you tell me why you think or why you believe it was important for you to be a part of this type of programs, this type of discussion, to be able to share your story and, just kind of be open with everyone?
Well, sure, I'll do that. I think storytelling is important. I think that everybody really is a product of their story.
Yeah.
Who they were with, their parents are, where they lived, what kind of food they had to eat. All those things adds up to who you are.
Yeah.
And when we see people and we fellowship together in a church setting, in a corporate setting, if people don't know the story, then they do not understand a lot of the things that you do or don't do.
Right.
And if you have an appreciation for somebody's story, then you get to understand and to treat with. I do think that a lot of people live in isolation.
Yeah.
Not by choice, but they live in isolation because we don't understand each other.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, I think people do not become who they can become. And church may not be all that it can be because people don't share stories.
Of course. Yeah, it's important. And I think, like you said, it just gives context to who somebody is.
Yeah.
I feel like it would help persons to also just understand that you're human and you have experiences and you didn't just come into the world
That's
as
right.
Brother Gideon and Bryce.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. For those of you, for
me that is a little food.
Yeah. But before we even jump into that, for those of us who don't know exactly who you are and your role and your title in the church and that kind of thing, could you let us know?
Well, yes, I would have been fortunate to have been born and grew up in a Seventh Adventist home. Having done that, I have developed a passion for church and things relating to church. So I have been always employed with the church and within the organization.
The conference, yeah.
In church settings itself, I have been as a youth leader, as a Pathfinder leader, and those kinds of things. Currently, I serve as a elder in the Good News Chapel. In terms of national leadership, I would have served as, on multiple councils and so on, National Council, Sports Council, NACOP chairperson, and also as assistant youth director, then youth director.
Right.
Currently, I'm serving as the chaplaincy and public campus ministries director in South Caribbean Conference. But that's only Trinidad, really.
Okay, but that's still a lot. I mean, we have a lot to discuss, right? All right, so now we can go back a bit. Well, a lot. Talk about how it was growing up. Just kind of briefly share that. So you mentioned a little earlier that you were fortunate to be raised in an Adventist home. What was that like for you, being a product of two Adventist parents growing up as a young Adventist?
Yeah, well, a product of two Adventist parents. They were Seventh Adventist time I came along, but
Yeah.
they were not always Seventh Adventist.
Right.
You know, my father was Baptist, my mother was Catholic. I never got around really to ask them how that happened, but they got married, and by the time I came along, they were Seventh Adventist.
Okay.
So I grew up in a Seventh Adventist home. I think to some degree that benefited me, the fact that they were not always Seventh Adventists, because
Yeah.
I think my father was what I consider to be sort of liberal Adventist at the time.
Yeah.
So that there are things that a lot of Adventist children didn't do that we got to do.
Yeah.
You know, my father was a lot into sports. As a matter of fact, we had a cricket net in our own backyard. We had a table tennis board. Our house was like the fun house on a Saturday night. People would come and play on lime and so on.
Yeah.
I got to go to pujas, Hindu pujas. I went to Sunday churches, you know, when friends invited us, we went to go and so it was, I think we had a good home.
Yeah.
You know, I had siblings, two brothers. Well, three brothers. I had two, and then one came along after a little while.
Okay.
Right? So it was two brothers, eventually three, and two sisters. And how it staggered, you know, I think the girls sometimes thought that they were boys because they would play cricket with us, they would climb trees, they would do all kind of thing. But then we also learned to play moral and hopscotch and those kind of things. So it was really a fun family, nice family. Sabbath breakfast together and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I think it was a nice family growing up. You know,
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I mean, we got vexed with each other, we quarreled and so on, we got licks and that kind of thing, but I think it was enjoyable.
Okay, that sounds nice. But seeing that you did grow up in an Adventist home, it means that you'd have been introduced to faith and God and, you know, the Bible, right? And had a early understanding of those things. What were some struggles you had with faith or your relationship with God as, you know, a child or as a youth, as a teen, etc.?
Well, I really didn't understand God.
Yeah.
I went to church, I knew that there was a God. I believed that God was real.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure I really appreciated who this God was. And I'm not so sure I liked him. Well, we were supposed to love him, but I'm not so sure I liked him.
Wow. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I really pictured God in a way he was displayed. And thinking about it now, as I said, my father and they were not harsh, but I think from all the accumulation of all the concepts that you heard and sermons preached and so on, I really thought of God as this long-beard guy that sat on this big throne looking down,
Yeah.
you know, and you will hear they read about Ellen White that talk about God is scrutinizing with exactitude and recording everything with precision, and I can't remember the exact quote, but I know it was frightening the way it was just
Yeah.
hearing how it was read was frightening, that this was a God that was scrutinizing everything you do, and every time you make a mistake, he checking that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's adding up, and someday you will get licks for that. You know, and I really not so sure I like that God. You know, and to be honest, I do think that a lot of people are turned off from Christianity because how this God is depicted.
Yeah.
And so when I did something that was wrong, when I did something that was incorrect and so on, approaching God was a real issue.
Yeah.
Because you think that he's absolutely vexed, and that he really thinks that his mission is to punish you.
Yeah.
You know, because you're supposed to know better than that. Take some licks.
So that distorted, you know, your ability to really connect, to be open, to be vulnerable with God. It was like, I don't want to upset you.
With God and with other people.
Right.
You know, because if you thought that was what God was like, then you are thinking that is what Christianity is supposed to represent.
Right.
So the fact that, so you became very intolerant of other people. Now, at that time, I didn't think of it as intolerance.
Right.
In fact, I didn't even sure if I knew that word. But you knew that wrongdoing was something that was to be detested. And while, yes, you wanted to detest, but we could not differentiate. I could not differentiate detesting a wrong act as opposed to detesting somebody.
Right.
And also,
It kind of got muddy, like.
very muddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that, or rather, did you find, because of that perspective that you had and because of that struggle, did you have an issue with connecting with persons in the church as well? Like specifically in church, being open and being able to share and have like accountability and relationships even with persons older than you?
And that's what I was saying from the beginning.
Yeah.
The fact of if you are intolerant of somebody's errors, then you do expect any different reaction from you being in error from somebody else.
Yeah.
And so really sharing really was very minimal, you know. And I probably would have said sometime before, we also had the concept, you know, that from long time you're hearing that, you know, when you share, people will preach about what you say and those kind of things. And
or
really
just judge you.
Yeah,
that's how
yes,
young people feel
yeah.
now, you know.
So everybody, at least for me, you might as well just keep it inside and struggle with it. But you're struggling in a losing battle, because the source of overcoming the struggle, you're not comfortable with having a conversation with a person about the struggle. So Christianity became a
lonely road.
A real lonely, tough road. And you know, you watching and you're not seeing light at the end of the tunnel, because you're not sure that you can make this. You know it's what you're supposed to do, but you're not sure that you can make this, you know, and you're just there.
So talk to me a bit about how you overcame that struggle of, you know, this view you had of God. How did that view change, and why? Like, what happened in order for you to see God as who he truly is, and then how did that help your relationship with God and others?
Yeah, well let me plug this in, right? My journey changed when really and truly I went to AY Summit, and one of the youth leaders said, was Pastor Dutton, you know, he said, he made a statement. He says, "You are as powerful as you read." You know, and that's, you are as powerful as you read. Now, I don't think I read my first full book until I was probably the age of 15, 16, somewhere around that age.
Right.
So I really didn't like reading at all. I didn't mind stories and those kind of things, but reading and out of that. But he said, you know, you're as powerful as you read. And I didn't really want power, but I wanted to do what I was doing properly.
Right.
Now, all this time I was an AY leader and so on, right? But you're still having struggles and so on. And so I started to read. And it is in reading I found answers.
Yeah.
You know, I found answers. You know, books like Morris Vanden that spoke about to know God, and how do I find my will in God, and those kind of things. I started to read those kinds of books, And is in reading those books, I came to understand, really who this God is, and how to relate to this God, and how to accept the assurance of salvation that God has given you.
Yeah.
And so in reading, so that will be my encouragement to anybody. Get good books and read. Not Bills and Boons, not now I don't beat people for reading Bills and Boons. I personally won't read it, right? But I'm just saying, lots of reading is good, but you also have to choose what you read if you want to be empowered.
Yeah.
So you can have a lot of information, but not necessarily be empowered. So that was where I found my thing in terms of reading and in terms of sharing. We had a group that was called Orchids from a long time AY, and that group is to meet every Tuesday night. And we were encouraged, to start your own devotional life, start your own, and so I developed my own personal devotional life from that encouragement. And even that story was interesting. I don't know if I have time to say that story.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. I remember we were encouraged. We were studying the kingdom of glory and the kingdom of grace.
Right.
Those two kingdoms. What's the difference between the kingdom of glory and the kingdom of grace? And that devotion said, the leader said to us that to start your devotional life, make God king of your kingdom, of your heart, and that's the kingdom of grace. And so she gave us, she said, tell God, talk to God, and tell him how you feel, what you want. And he will probably wake you up and have a devotion. He said, even if a broomstick fall down or something, and it wake you up, know that God talking to you. And so I took that challenge up. And just as we were told, we had a wooden floor where we were living, and a broomstick did fall. And it did wake me up.
Yeah.
And that was so sure to me that it was actually God, because the exact example that she used, was what happened. And that to me started my journey of
faith,
of faith, of understanding, hey, God responds.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the reading plus those little small groups where we met in AY bands and so on, I think that was the genesis of my real faith in God.
Right. And so just to summarize even what you're saying there, it's like get to know God for yourself, because I think for a lot of us, like, we have a lot of preconceived notions of God based on our experiences with people, not necessarily our experience with God personally. And then in addition, you're encouraging us to get into community, because I think that's also what this series is trying to encourage, for us to not try to do it by ourselves, but to be around people that encourage us to pray.
Yeah. There really is a reason why God said for us not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together.
Yeah.
There's a reason why he set up the church system.
And not just in the traditional formal way, because people think that because they come to church every Sabbath and sit down in the, group, in the audience, and then they leave, like, that's gathering or that's community. But if you're not fellowshipping, actually, if you're not getting to know people, if you're not, reaching out, extending, like,
some people, I see them, they come to church, and as soon as the service finished, they're gone.
Yeah.
And now I don't know why, maybe they have to rush home to see about the elderly person or some kind of thing. So I'm not judging them, but I often wonder whether or not such actions really cause us to miss the benefits of why we came in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
all that we do with God in church, we probably could do at home,
Yeah, I could do that at home.
What we cannot do at home is to do it with other people.
Yeah.
And that is the essence of coming, to do it with other people, and therefore that body heat is necessary.
Even now, the COVID version of it is, Zoom breakout sessions, and when you're able to kind of just like talk with persons, even if we can't meet physically. A version of it now is to at least fellowship online and get together and chat and talk about your week and share. That's important. So I think that's something that we really should take note of within your story. So to pivot a little bit, you got into church leadership seemingly at a young age.
Yeah, I was probably about 15, 16, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you took on basically a life of leadership, I would say, right? You found purpose in youth ministry, and you've really been trotting that path for most of your life. So talk to me a bit about, you know, life within church leadership, and, you know, how you came to discover, like, this is my purpose and this is how I am going to continue journeying forward.
That is an interesting story. And I think how I became, how I got into leadership is a motivation for me to keep insisting.
Yeah.
So my family moved from, well, when I say my family, I was a child, right? But it's my parents.
Yeah.
We moved from Arima, where we were living. We came to live in St. Augustine, right on St. John Street there. And so we were looking for a church. We were actually thinking that we're not going to stop going to the church that we're going to, because we had fun there.
Yeah.
But we soon realized that not really making sense. So we found a small company on St. Vincent Street. Was an old lodge there that from a crusade that had started when Dr. Wiggins had a crusade, right on the conference compound. And a small company started there. We went there, we met, our cousins were in that thing, cousins that we didn't really have much connection with. But so that started a nice, well, not a reunion, but a union.
Yeah.
So one of the AY leaders there one day came to me and said that, you know, I'm led to ask you to serve on the AY Council. And I was like, who led you? And she was like, well, the Spirit told me to do that. And well, I even out spaces, right? Going quickly. And I said, no, I don't think that's for me. Now, growing up in church, I used to do 13 Sabbath memory verse and those kinds of things, but I really didn't have intentions of doing more than that.
Yeah.
I you know, I go to church, but you know, I don't really want to be anything. But she insisted, and she said something which she said, listen, go home and pray about it. Because this was after midday service.
Yeah.
She's talking to me and she said, well, go home and pray about it, and when you come, you know, this afternoon, tell me what God will do. Well, being a novice at something like this, because I and God are not real partners, so I mean, pray, you don't want to say you're not going to pray. I mean, after all, you're a Christian. So I said, okay. So I went home and I did pray. As to how to listen out for action from God, I don't know, because as I said, we're not really partners. We don't really have no long conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to listen. So I remember I used to do some stamp collections and so on. So I emptied the jar that I had these stamps in, and I write on a piece of paper, yes and a no. And I put it in this thing and I shake it up. So when I pull it out, I got a yes. So I didn't like the answer, so I put it back and shake it up again. I shake it up again. I pull it out again, yes again. I say, what trouble is this? So I decided I don't know what to do now, because I don't want to go back to church now and tell you that well, God say yes. So my answer to that was just don't go back to AY. So I didn't go back to AY.
Oh my God.
Because I don't want to tell her. I don't want to lie,
Yeah.
but I don't want to tell her yes. So I didn't bother to go back to AY. I stayed home. The rest of everybody went back to AY, and they came back home. You know, surprisingly, nobody asked me anything as to why I didn't come, anything. You know, so I was just there. You know, about 8 o'clock the night. Well, it seemed like about that kind of time. I am sure when I got away, I hear just knocking on the door, you know, and that was the lady came and she asked me, she said, well, I realized you didn't come back, but she said, come to find out what God say, you know, and well, I couldn't lie. Well, I shouldn't say I couldn't lie, but I wasn't a liar.
Yeah.
You know, so I had to tell her, and you know, and that started my journey. And from that, within 2 years or so, I was AY leader. I was then became junior church coordinator. We started Pathfinder Club and so on. And from that, I just became district leader, and I just, you know, God just used me, and until I became youth director.
Yeah.
You know, but what I'm always mindful of is what would have happened in terms of my leadership had that lady not come in night and knock on that door and ask me, say, I come to find out what God said to you.
You probably would have just ignored it and moved on with your life.
Yes, I'm going with my life.
Yeah,
you know?
she wasn't persistent.
And that's why I always advocate for the intergenerational ministry.
Yeah.
Where adults do not force young people, but they must be present.
Yeah.
And do not see a young person's no to mean that they don't necessarily want to do it. There are several different reasons why they are saying no.
Yeah.
And somehow and lots of times it's not because they don't want to do it.
Of course. And yeah, it's like a lot of us feel fear, we feel intimidated, but also it's connection as well. I know with my generation, we thrive on just feeling understood. We all want to feel understood.
Yeah.
So if we don't feel connected or we don't feel understood by those around us, we feel a little forced. It's not going to come naturally, and we won't reach out to take up these roles and these positions. So I really think it's important to have older persons that are mentoring younger persons, that are looking after them and seeking their best interest, kind of thing. With that being said, what is one piece of advice, since we want to keep it a little short, what is briefly one piece of advice you would give to young persons who are looking to figure out, like, what am I supposed to be doing here? For you, it came kind of unexpectedly, and you seem to just have followed the natural progression of that and the natural path that God had set out. For others, it might seem like, well, I have all these interests, I don't know what I'm doing, how do I align myself with purpose and with what God wants me to do?
Well, what I have learned, and it's not necessarily a simple thing, well, it actually is simple, but not necessarily easy to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that making sense. Right? But it's really about just asking God, talking to God about it in a very straight and plain way. And I think a lot of times what I have learned to overcome is being vulnerable with God.
Right.
Because really and truly, you're not vulnerable.
Yeah.
But we think that we are, God's request to be perfect means that we have to be flawless. And God's perfection, and I hope you understand what I'm saying when I say this, God's perfection is not flawlessness. God's perfection is a consistent desire to become, to grow, and to live to what you know, and to be able to admit when you did not do, or when I did not do all that I was supposed to do. I can admit that and take it from there. Submission. That is what God wants, the journey, a moving in a right direction. So if I am in a red band maxi on the bus route and I'm moving towards Potter's Pain is the destination. That's what we're looking for. That's perfection, right? But once I'm in the maxi going in the right direction, and I am deliberately choosing to stay in the maxi going in that direction, that is what God wants to do. Yeah. Because when you read Spirit of Prophecy, we are told that even when we get to heaven, we're still learning. So if we're going to be learning, even when we get to heaven, means that when He comes, there are still things that we don't know. Yeah. So it means that the perfection that we're talking about being here is not absolute knowledge. Right. So what God wants, that perfection, is really staying in the red band maxi, going in the right direction. And God's grace is what makes up for the rest of the distance that we didn't arrive at when the end comes. Yeah. And so my advice would be talk to God and become vulnerable with God. Tell him what you feel, what you think, what you don't like, what you hate, what you don't want to hate, but you hate, what you want to hate, but you don't hate it, and talk to him.
Yeah.
And tell him these things, these passions, what you're feeling. This is what I think I want to do, but I'm not so sure. Have conversations with him.
Yeah.
And then listen. Now, those responses will come either through somebody or through something that you're reading, or the Spirit will just put it in your head. Boom. It will come different ways. But listen out for the answers. Listen out for the answers. But have conversations with God.
Yeah.
Tell him exactly what you feel and what you think, and tell him how you want him to answer. Now, you may not answer that way, but tell him.
And I think also patience is important, because I think sometimes for us, again, being in a generation of social media, things being very instant, we kind of want a clear, instant answer as soon as we ask. And that's not necessarily how, because I'm sure when you became AY leader, God didn't immediately tell you you're going to be the youth director.
No, and I actually had no intentions.
Exactly, and you didn't know that that's where you'd end up. And that was part of your purpose. So for us, I think it's similar, that purpose is not necessarily this giant end goal that's placed in our lap in the beginning.
That patience thing, I think, is important. Now, I had what was a medical condition called osteoestoma. It's a cancer in the femur, and the right femur.
Yeah.
I had that painful experience of that. I mean, in the femur, in the marrow, you have, it's painful.
Yeah.
And for close to 5-6 years, I prayed about this thing, what it was. Now, I thought it was an injury, a number of mixed diagnoses. People treat my back, my knee, my hip, all kinds of things, different places. I went all over the place and praying about it, talking to God about it, and still pain.
Yeah.
I mean, intense pain, where sometimes I came to work and my boss would have to send me home.
Yeah.
He says, "You come in, go home," you know. But you're talking to God, but you seem like you're not getting an answer, responding to this thing, but you're still serving God, you're going, but you're wandering, you know, those kinds of things. And I mean, well, that's our next story, because how God resolved that for me in itself was a whole miracle, right? And that I got treated by one of the #1 doctors in the US, free of charge.
Wow.
Right? And just how that happened was a miracle in itself. You know? But I'm just saying that story to show patience, you know. So that testimony itself became a testimony to other people, and it became a testimony to myself.
Yeah.
That okay, God may not work it immediately, but He's putting the pieces in place to give you the best doctor.
Yeah, yeah. And you wouldn't know at the beginning how it's gonna end, but again, it's patience, it's faithfulness, it's staying the course, and believing that ultimately He will reveal in time what is meant to be revealed.
That's right.
Yeah. So purpose is not just one giant destination. I tell people this. I feel like you serve different types of purposes throughout your life, that will lead you to something for sure. But every season has its own purpose, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have learned quite a bit about you. I think that I have a really good understanding of the fact that though you served such a great life of leadership, it didn't start off as that, like this clear picture of, I am going to be youth director. I am going to be...
Certainly not. And I really, I mean, my concept of God would not have been one, I mean, when I was younger, would not have been one where I really would have wanted to be anything too closely associated.
Yeah.
You know? And now, having said that though, on reflection, you are seeing how God was putting little things in place, you know, from mission stories that I heard from a child, from experiences where my father will take us to work, because he himself worked at the conference office for some time. So he would take us to work. We would go to workers' meeting. So we interacted with the workers. I had a sense of camaraderie and family with the conference workers, and I got familiar with just being on, in the pong and those kinds of things. And when I reflect now, you see, God was putting things in place, but it was not my intention at all.
Yeah, you didn't see how the pieces were lining up for that, but God put that together, unbeknownst to you. So I think that's, a really powerful testimony as to how God can use us, but also the importance of obedience as well, because you had to be obedient within your journey to get to where you are now. You had to be
always obedient,
but but you learn. And you were obedient in ways that God was able to use, like praying to ask about the AY position and different things like that. So thank you for sharing. I hope that you would be blessed by Brother Rice's story. I hope that we all have a better understanding of you now that you have opened up and shared with us, and you have told us where you come from and where you are now, and also why you're so passionate about not only youth ministry but fellowship and community and succession, being able to have persons mentor and prepare the next generation to be in the positions that you have been able to be in.
Yes, thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. And like you, I'm trusting that the stories do help. Cement our fellowship, our own journey.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Now we will take you to our next segment. I hope you enjoy.
Always be a place for you at my table. Return to me.